You come around a corner, away from the noise of the opening. There is only one exhibit. She stands in the spotlight with her back to you, a sweep of pale hair on paler skin, a column of emerald silk that ends in a pool at her feet. She might be the model in a perfume ad, the trophy wife at a formal gathering, one of the guests at this very opening, standing on an empty pedestal in some ironic act of artistic deconstruction. You hesitate, about to turn away. Her hand balls into a fist. They told me you were coming. The gallery's end. Unlit except for the single spotlight. Unfurnished except for the defining swath of black velvet and a placard on a little stand. On the pedestal is Galatea. Look at her. She is facing away from you. You cannot see her face, only her hair and the line of her shoulder. It's hard to know what she's looking at. The velvet backdrop, if she has her eyes open, but there's not much to see in that. Mostly, it is obvious she is not looking at you. Her green dress widens out at the knee, falling over the pedestal on which she stands in a way that would probably be very awkward if she wanted to move. Ask about her. Read the placard, she says. That's what it's there for, after all. Read placard. Large cream letters on a black ground. 47 Galatea, white Thasos marble. Non-commissioned work by the late Pygmalion of Cyprus. The artist has since committed suicide. Originally not an animate, the waking of this piece from its natural state remains unexplained. Ask about artist. A pause. I don't know where he is, she says, or who, or what for that matter. He sold me immediately after my waking. While he was carving me, there was no strangeness, but afterward. Hug her. You know better than that, naturally. But the fact that it crossed your mind surprises you a bit. You have never had any trouble keeping it clear in your mind when you're dealing with a piece of machinery rather than a person. Attack her. You don't, of course, but the impulse takes you off guard. The mood departs again, of course, and quickly. It was just a stray thought. It meant nothing. But you haven't had so strong a reaction to any piece of art since you went to the Cancer Society installation. And that was timing. It was only the timing that made that so bad. You push aside the old weight, but the effort leaves you tired. He had a studio in Cyprus, she continues, dropping one line of thought and picking up another. That's where I was born. He brought the marble for me there and carved me. Think about cancer. Remembering on purpose is not something you forced yourself to do for a long time, and it is perhaps not a good idea even now. Worries, first symptoms, diagnosis, despair. Standing in the hospital parking lot in the whirling snow, watching the lights go out on her floor. The hours and hours consumed by intractable emotions. And then, when she was gone, the utter solitude in your life. Are you all right? Galatea is reaching towards you, but you turn away. The end. Would you like to restart, restore a saved game, or quit? Restart. Deja vu. Look at her. She is faced with deja vu again. Huh. Ask about backdrop. She turns, not her whole body, just her head, so that you can see one ear behind the cascade of hair. What's so fascinating about the curtain that it merits your fixed attention? She laughs, turns a bit towards you, seems to relax a shade. Nothing, she says, except that it presents no surprises. You raise an eyebrow. Processing humor in an apparently spontaneous manner is a rarity. Ask about placard. Tell me what the placard says, you say. I can't read it from here, she remarks dryly, and you know I'm not allowed to get down. Read placard. Ask about carving. Do you remember being carved, you ask? You become aware of her breathing, the slight expansion of her ribs, the soft exhalation, natural and yet somehow studied. Better, I dare say, than you remember being born, she replies, her voice low and mocking. Ask about carving. Very well, you say, brushing aside her smugness. What was it like, then? Even as she says it, for a moment, you sense something odd about her skin. It seems to sparkle as though it were made of millions of tiny crystals. An unusual and evocative effect. You haven't seen stone effects in skin since that guy's name who you can't pronounce Gargoyle series about 10 years ago. But then, the grotesque school is pretty well dead at this point. A pause. It hurt. Not beyond endurance, but in a way that was frightening. Ask about pain. How could it have been painful to be carved? He wasn't cutting into you, just around you. Her head moves, as though she were going to turn and look at you properly, but then she thinks better of it. The stone beyond the boundary of oneself is numb, but there always comes a time when the chisel or the point reaches down to where feeling begins and strikes. Likewise the drill. And being polished left all my skin burning and itching for days. Choke, slam, train, pause, video. No, that's a silly idea. Ask about drill. Tell me about the drill, you say. I can't, she answers, hesitant. Of all the tools he used, it was the only one that made me afraid. I trusted his skill with the others, but when he was putting the corners in my eyes, the spaces between my fingers, then I had doubts. Look at hands. She follows your glance, lifting one hand and spreading the fingers to show you the delicate modeling. Ask about hands. So your fingers, all the separations were done with a drill. Yes, she says, and then smoothed. But if he had just tried to carve them directly with the chisel, the marble might have fractured. He did explain that much to me. She holds up one hand and flexes the fingers experimentally. The movement, she adds, with a twist of humor, was not courtesy of his work. And I must say that I'm glad I didn't have to endure the individual manufacture of muscle and bone, or whatever it is that I have in place of it. Ask about fear. When you're afraid, what is it like? She laughs without mirth. What makes you think that it's any different for me than it would be for you? Or are you trying to pretend that you've never been afraid? The curtain moves in a slight breeze. It was just a question, you remark mildly. Ask about waking. What was it like, waking up, you ask? She shifts so that she is now standing in profile to you, facing the blank wall. It was night. I had been able to hear and see for a long time. It was the talking or the pain of being carved that made me aware, I think. But one night, he slept in a corner of the studio. I heard him screaming in his sleep, more loudly than usual, and I forgot that I couldn't move, and I just stepped down and woke him. She gains confidence as you do not interrupt. At the time, he seemed glad to have me there, to listen to him, though I think he thought that I was only another dream. But afterward, in the morning, it was strange. Kill her. Wait, what? You don't, of course, but the impulse takes you off guard. You wonder what it is about her that provokes such undeserved wrath. Maybe the perplexing mixture of pride and vulnerability, the sense at one moment that she's leading you by the nose, and the next that she has no idea what she's up to. Or maybe it's the way she looks, as though the slightest touch would bruise her, as though wringing her neck would be as easy, as gratifying, as juicing an orange. The taste in the back of your throat makes you wonder if you're going to be ill. Is this really you, this nasty-minded brute? We're dark inside, all of us, but you'd thought more of yourself. You don't stay to look longer. Later, you may regret the cowardice that prevents you from looking in this particular mirror, but there are limits to endurance. Ugh, did that really happen? Oh man, what a headache. This odd sense of deja vu. Look at her, Galatea. Yes, that seems familiar. But what if I touch her? You put a hand on her shoulder. The skin is smooth and warm, though it lacks the velvety finish of a vintage hussar. You might try speaking to me, she prompts. It is not polite merely to prod at me, and I've gotten very bored standing here. And attempt to engage the audience, the proactive element. You frame the words for your review, but you find that you can't get as far as a complete first sentence. There's something more here. Anxious, chilly, visceral. Better pay attention. Thank you, conscience. Don't know where that came from. Galatea. Hello. Hello, you say, and stop. What would you say next? I'm a famous critic? Be on your best behavior? There's no etiquette established, and then it strikes you as strange, and you should bother to be concerned. Fortunately, the little awkwardness is lost on her. Good of you not to walk away again, she replies. Wait, what? Read placard. You become aware of her breathing, the slight expansion of her ribs, the soft exhalation, natural and yet somehow studied. By the way, she says, in a way that utterly fails to be casual, have you seen the artist out there? My artist, that is. No, you respond, uneasy. You open your mouth and close it again. Talk about suicide. Okay. Sorry about that. Tell her about suicide, rather. The artist, you say gently. It says on the placard that he has committed suicide. Her head moves, as though she were going to turn and look at you properly. But then she thinks better of it. Time passes, but she doesn't move. You are tempted to reach out to her, but the memory of the last time you touched her still leaves you a little embarrassed, as though you'd made it obvious that you weren't thinking of her as an actual person. The intention would be just the opposite now, but the barrier is there, so you just stand there, looking uselessly at the back of her head and wishing that she'd turn around. I don't know, she says in a strained voice, what I am supposed to do now. I only exist because of him, for his sake. You bite back a remark on the virtues of modern feminism. Ask about exhibit. You do realize what kind of exhibition you're part of, correct? You ask. This is your favorite question for the evening, by far. Some of the other exhibits have quite clever responses. But she merely looks confused. Bad setup on this one. An art exhibit, she says stupidly. What other kind is there? Tell her about exhibit. You clear your throat. This is an artificial intelligence exhibit. The artists, usually team of artists actually, construct bodies, like yours, although I have to say that yours shows an unusually high degree of precision, and then they put in machinery to animate the bodies, and programming to teach the bodies how to speak to the viewers. It's a kind of game. I try to see if I can trick you into acting in a way that a real person wouldn't act. And most of the pieces have some kind of backstory and personality. It's a kind of art as well as a technical skill. So I'm a machine, according to you. The curtain moves in a slight breeze. Essentially, you admit. Ask about carving. Do you remember being carved, you ask? She hunches one shoulder. Better, I dare say, than familiar again. Very well. Very well, you say, brushing aside her smugness. What was it like then? Her head moves, as though she were going to turn and look at you properly, but then she thinks better of it. It hurt. Not beyond endurance, but in a way that was frightening, and again familiar, almost as if we had heard this one before. Ask about carving. I've told you all I know about it, she says. You feel a twinge of disappointment. Other things about this piece are so promising. The meticulous attention to detail on the body, the delicacy of the facial expressions, the variability of mood. There are those who would call that inconsistency or lack of a coherent artistic vision. But you've seen too many pieces. You've seen too many pieces, stereotypes made animate. The hint of instability. But no piece is going to get a serious critical reception with such a pathetic database. And that's that. Ask about carving. Her hand clenches in the fabric of her gown. Is this part of a test, she asks? Are you trying to determine whether I've been well programmed? Get this. I don't have anything more to say on the subject. as I believe I've mentioned. You nod, suppressing your smile. The imperious style can be very effective. You've seen less seasoned critics cowed into discontinuing a difficult line of questioning by such a touch. Ask about placard. So, what if the placard's a trick, you say? Pygmalion might actually be alive and well, and the whole point of this is for me to tell you and garner reaction. She turns to face you in a rustle resettling skirts. So you're saying that I'm just programmed to respond to the idea that he committed suicide and everything is just a show. You nod a little apologetically. You know there are some points on which your responses are vague or odd. I wouldn't say that you exactly passed the Turing test. Her eyes shudder, go dark. I could prove it to you if I wanted to, she says. I bet none of your clever mechanical people is allowed to hurt someone. Am I right? No violence? That wouldn't be part of the programming. Her voice takes on a distant menace. And to be honest, it has a certain appeal. Since you've been every kind of an ass. Don't look so surprised that I know the word. You stand there calmly, admiring the sophistication of this argument, and wondering what went into programming it. So it takes you by surprise when she reaches out, disproportionately long arms she has, and catches you around the throat. The end. Would you like to restart, restore saved game, or quit? I don't quite think that's what I was going for. Son of a bitch. Fair enough, Galatea. Restart. Restart? No. Okay. Just checking. Just wanted to make sure that no. Well, shit. Apparently death means death. Should I cut this out? Nah, I'll leave it in. What the hell? It'll alleviate some. Hold on. Man, this feels like Groundhog Day. Am I Bill Murray? Come on. Alright, Galatea. We meet again. Look at Galatea. She's facing away from me. Well, I would like to admire the exhibit from all angles. Turn her. You take her by the elbow and turn her a few degrees towards yourself. She cooperates, but her arm feels stiff under your touch. Don't do that again, please, she says. She's not a real person. Turn her. You take her by the elbow and turn her a few degrees towards yourself. Too quickly for you to react, she catches your wrist with her other hand, holding it so tightly that you fear for the bones. I told you, she says, not to do that again. Heat floods you. She shouldn't be able to do that. Shouldn't touch the audience without permission. Certainly shouldn't inflict pain or injury. Broken, spluttering, you speak in old reset code, Eudoxia, but she doesn't respond, other than with a positively ghoulish smile. It's going to take a couple of shots of something strong to keep nightmares out of your head tonight. Son of a bitch. Alright, Galatea. Look at her. Touch her. Galatea. Hello. Look at placard. Placard. Ask about waking. All of this such deja vu. Wait. You take a deep breath. Her head moves as though she were going to turn and look at you properly, but then she thinks better of it. He didn't want me to be awake, you see. He didn't make me to be a live person. He told me he wanted something that belonged to him, and that if I could think and talk, I couldn't belong to him anymore. So he threw me away. It's all in the delivery. Hers is not bad. Too bad about the artist. Ask about artist. Alright. Ask about artist. Tell me what you do know about him, you prompt. He hated people, though I think he was also quite lonely. It was a question of not having patience for anyone. Very quietly. If anyone tried to come up to the studio, he'd get out his shotgun and fire into the air until they got the idea. The woman didn't even bring milk if she knew he was there. They had a system of leaving things for each other so that they didn't have to meet. And when he sold me, it was the same. He wrote letters, made arrangements, did not even stay with me when they came to look me over. Ask about sale. How did you come into the possession of your current owners, you ask? The air conditioning hums, sending a ripple through the velvet curtain. He knew them from before, she replies, and when he wanted to sell me, he wrote them, and they actually flew out to Cyprus to inspect me. He told me that this was a great honor, and explained how I should behave, and then he left to lie low a while they carried out the inspection. Ask about inspection. What was that like? She moves her arm, just a slight movement. It comes into an unexpectedly graceful position. Art, not nature. If you'd been about to forget that she began as a statue. They had a key to the studio, she says, almost playfully. So they came in, took a look around, and saw me standing there in my place. They didn't realize at first that I could move and see them. He told me to behave as though I were a statue, so I did. Then, when they'd had a good look, I turned my head and started to speak. It was quite amusing. One of them fainted. He warned them what to expect, but I think they didn't believe him until they saw for themselves. Ask about travel. How did you get here from Cyprus? Oh, I flew. They had me in a crate, which was uncomfortable and cold as well. But that was the only way for them to get me through customs, because of course, since I wasn't born anywhere, I didn't have a passport. I did my best to look still and motionless when customs checked me. Fortunately, they weren't very thorough. Ask about customs. What was it like going through customs? I held very still and didn't breathe, she says, and I let myself look like a statue again. Before your eyes, her skin seems to grow harder, less receptive, and her hair seems like a single piece. Then the illusion fades. You stand there staring for another moment. Very odd effect, that. Ask about owners. Excuse me. Take antacid pill. What are your owners like? Aren't they out there in the other room? She asks, surprised. That's where they said they were going to be. Yes, of course, you say quickly. Her head moves, as though she were going to turn and look at you properly. But then she thinks better of it. I was wondering about your impressions of them. Obviously, you must have a different perspective than I could. She shrugs. I know too little about people to come to any kind of conclusion. And they don't talk to me much. No one does these days. Pause. Resume video. Take a deep breath. I apologize. It occurs to you that it would be great fun if you could get her to come down from that pedestal. It sounds as though her owners have been quite cavalier with her. You love to shake up their expectations. Ask about exhibit. Do you know what kind of exhibition this is? This seems familiar. Tell her about exhibit. You clear your throat and nod your head at how familiar this is again. Tell her about suicide. Hug her. No, don't touch me. She withdraws from you. Don't touch me. She is breathing like a runner. You act as though all this were a game, as though my grief were invented for you. But it isn't. That's what frightened him. I'm real. Do you understand? No one carved this into me. I know, you say, swift and low. I know. She raises a hand to her face and sighs. There's a moment of stillness. Think about owners. You've known the owners of this gallery for some time, though you'd hardly count them close friends. Sometimes motivated more by social ambition and a desire to make a stir than that they are interested in art. What? They nonetheless have put on What? Okay, this isn't my fault. They nonetheless have put on an surprising and original show over the years. They don't seem to have treated Galatea very well, though. Not that that's necessarily surprising, but you'd kind of enjoy seeing her do something that would upset their expectations. Enter pedestal. Hey, you say. Trade you places. She turns to face you, in a rustle resettling skirts. What? She asks, startled. Come on, get down. You can wander around, talk to people, look at things. She just looks at you speculatively, her forehead creased. Very well, she says finally. She steps down, and you climb up in her place, first hanging your jacket strategically over the placard. Which is how it comes about that you spend the rest of the night sitting on the pedestal. It's rather amusing, in fact. Your long familiarity with animate behavior styles makes it easy to emulate one. Of course, you are a bit piqued by your reviews, supplied only with esoteric data, personable in a self-deprecating way, but unexciting, breaking no important barriers in the development of more human-like animates. Damn critics. From the same source, you read that the gallery hired a new assistant. In the photo, she's looking severely at the camera, her pure blonde hair taken up in a French twist. It's already occupied, and there's certainly no room for two. Interesting statement, though, that might make. Well, shit, I don't want to live the rest of my life as an exhibit. Whew. Oh, man. I haven't gone on these benders since the days I was, dragged into road rash and Starzu repeatedly.
And Pirate's Gold, let's not forget that too. Okay. What do you got for me next, Groundhog Day? Look at her. Ask about her. Read placard. Ask about suicide. Oh, shit. Ask her about suicide. Oh, fuck. No? Tell her about suicide. The artist, you say gently. It says on the placard that he... Okay. Ask her about suicide. Why do you think he did it, you ask? He was miserable, she snaps. He was haunted. He couldn't sleep without nightmares of people who were dead and still couldn't speak to each other, of shades passing each other in the dark. A singularly unsatisfactory story, all things considered. There must be more to it. A botched love affair, a child lost to disease, abuse, rape, some past trauma festering gangrenously out of the past. There is always a sordid backstory to pieces like this. Ask her about suicide. Oh. That didn't reveal anything more. Galatea, get down. Why don't you come down from there, you ask? It can't be comfortable. Comfortable? There's a mocking bitterness in her voice. Do you honestly think that I care, at the moment, about the fact that my feet hurt, and my shoulders are bare, and that the spotlight is damnably hot? I was bothered by that, until you got here. You're silent, not sure how to reply. She sighs. Perhaps that was unfair. I'm not acquainted with the etiquette of a situation like this, she goes on, in a more restrained tone. But I don't know how I could begin to face all of that out there, the people milling around and talking. Galatea, get down. Standing up there isn't going to make this easier, you say. No one owns you, but as long as you treat yourself like a work of art, you won't be able to come to terms with your own humanity. He didn't want me to be alive, she says. Not fully, not as a human being. He didn't know how to deal with that. If I'd stay still and silent, he could have gone on telling me things. And maybe if he'd had that outlet, he wouldn't. That he didn't want you to be alive was his failing, not yours. The words ring in your ears after you speak. Would you want any creation of yours to come to life and start talking to you? Much easier to think of this in terms of gender politics. She turns so that as she is looking at you straight on, level gaze, smoky eyes, brows pale and washed out in the light. Not her most beautiful angle, which might be why she avoids it. And so what would you have me do? I have no skills, no family, no money, no possessions other than the clothes I'm standing in. She makes a dismissive gesture that takes in all the yards of glinting green fabric. And though I have reason to think that it was expensive, something tells me it isn't practical for everyday use. You smile at the image of her trying to file papers or wash a car in that dress. It's on your lips to say you'll look after her. You more or less have to offer, don't you? No matter how inconvenient that might eventually prove. And perhaps it will come to that in a few minutes. But it's not what she needs to hear at the moment. Leap of faith, you say. Her mouth quirks. All right then, she says. Here we go. Catching up the excess of her gown, she jumps off, ignoring the hand you extend in support. The two of you walk out, without looking back. An intriguing ending. Let's see if that ends the Groundhog Day. Nope, that was not enough to break this inevitable deja vu of repeating the same instance ad infinitum. Very well. At least it's not ad nauseum. On the pedestal is Galatea. Look at her. Ask about her. Touch her. You put a hand on her shoulder. Again. Touch her back. You put a hand on her back, between the shoulder blades, to feel her breath rising and falling, and the faint motion of implied muscle. When you take the hand away, however, she shivers. All you can think is, animates don't do that. There's a conventional limit to their interactivity. They're meant to be touched, but not to react. Read placard. Ask about artist. Wait. Wait. He had a studio in Cyprus, she continues, dropping one line of thought and picking up another. That's where I was born. He brought the marble for me there and carved me. Ask about studio. It was always full of sunshine, she remarks. The windows were open day and night, and the breeze came from the shore. The first thing that I saw, when I began to see, was the ocean off beneath us. Ask about ocean. It was a terrible disappointment, she remarks thoughtfully, when I first learned that the ocean is only water, slipping back and forth under the command of the moon. He used to tell me things like that, even before I asked. I think he could perceive where I was looking, what I wanted to know. Wait. There's a moment of stillness. Look at her. Look at her hair. It is a pale Scandinavian blonde, curling just a little beside her face, but elsewhere straight and quite severe. Touch hair. It is fine as an infant's, but resistant too, and slightly stiff. Ask about her hair. She touches the end of one strand self-consciously, as though surprised to find it there, then shrugs. It is just like anyone else's, she says. I have to wash it every day and brush it, and that, I can tell you, is not much fun. It's very fine, see? And she loops a bit around her finger, and lets it go, and it ties itself in knots when I'm asleep. Look at her hand. She has slender hands with tapering fingers. At the moment, they hang loosely at her sides, sometimes hiding themselves for a moment in the folds of her gown. Touch hand. You touch the fine skin on the back of her hand and marvel at the shifting of bones beneath. Ask about her hand. Your hands seem very delicately made. All the separations were done with a drill, yes, she says, and then smoothed. But if he had just tried to carve them directly with the chisel, the marble might have been, this is familiar. Look at her. Kiss her hand. You kiss her hand, very much in the grand manner. She thaws perceptibly. Ask about backdrop. She turns, not her whole body, just her head, so that you can see one ear behind the cascade of hair. What's so fascinating about the curtain that it merits your fixed attention? She laughs, turns a bit towards you, seems to relax a shade. Nothing, she says, except that it presents no surprises. You raise an eyebrow. Look at her ear. They are shell-like and translucent in the spotlight, a gleaming, pure white. Touch her ear. You trace the edge of one ear. The shape is remarkably accurate, but the texture is wrong. What ought to be velvet is waxy, stiff, and cold. She holds herself very still. Look at her cheek. As pale as the rest of her face. Touch cheek. You trace the curve of her cheek gently with the back of one finger. And jerk your hand away. What you'd meant as an assessing gesture, realism in every particular, that's the goal. A good critic thinks about skin texture and warmth, damn it. You're doing your job suddenly feels like something else. Perhaps because she's looking at you, her eyes unnaturally wide. Your eyes meet, and she lets go a slow breath. Yes, you say softly. That's what I thought. Whatever she is, she's no animate. She says nothing, but you suspect that she heard you clearly enough. Think about animates. Seems these days that you don't think of anything else. Sometimes, when you're in the middle of a conversation with a real person, you find yourself mentally critiquing their dialogue design, or wishing that someone had taken a little more care with skin tone. A little twisted, maybe, but the study of animate design has actually led to a new understanding of how conversational pragmatics work. You only realize how many rules govern an interaction when you see them violated. Think about Galatea. You're not sure what to think. She looks like an animate. Mostly she acts like one. Sometimes she looks like an animate sometimes. She's in an animate exhibit. Exit? In one of the best reputed galleries in the country. She's also an advanced piece, if she's a piece at all, by an artist, one artist, not a workshop or team, of whom you have never heard before. And you've heard of everyone. Ask about waking experience. Galatea, turn around. Would you turn a bit, you ask? She turns again, almost fully towards you, though she can't seem to actually look at you. Her face is still toward the side. There. Gracious, she is not. Her eyes flicker, but we have heard that. Kiss her. You know better than that. Naturally. But the fact that it crossed your mind surprises you. You have never had any trouble keeping it clear in your mind when you're dealing with a piece of machinery rather than a person. Looked at objectively, she has nothing on Felipe Kieran's Joan of Arc, or anything by Hazard. If she's beautiful in a distinctly creepy way, and you only become more aware of that as you look at her. No, it's that she doesn't entirely seem like a machine, and all your calculations are off. Damn it, I said kiss her. Her eyes meet yours. She seems to read what you're thinking, because she bends down, putting a hand on your shoulder to steady herself. When she pulls away, Her eyes meet yours with unexpected candor. She looks more human than she has all evening. Come on. You give a little tug, and she steps down from the pedestal. There are things we should discuss, and this is not the place. All right. The night is young, and you're so... No. Well, she is, in a distinctly creepy way, apparently. Well, I'm sure that'll end the Groundhog Day. Thank you all for joining me, and this delightful view of Galatea. I'm going to go discuss some things with her, and this is most certainly not the place. Farewell. Oh, god damn it. Fuck. Son of a bitch, that wasn't it? Ah, what do I have to do? I've committed suicide. I've kissed the statue. I've thought of... I don't even want to think about cancer again. How do I escape this infinite loop? Look at Galatea. Galatea. Hello. Look at her dress. If you knew designers, you might recognize it. It looks expensive. A shimmering column from the bodice down to the knee, where it flares to cover the whole base of the pedestal. No, I don't think so. What does your artist look like? Black hair, she says, and stops. Never mind. He's not here. He wouldn't have come. Ask about artist. Ask about waking. Right. Ask about him. That should refer to the artist. She moves her arm, just a slight movement. It comes into an unexpectedly graceful position. Art, not nature. If you'd been about to forget that she began as a statue. What else, you ask gently? Tell me more about him. There were days when he didn't work at all. He would walk around the studio, talking to himself, to me, throwing things at the wall. Fits, he called them. Ask about fits. Did he ever say, or could you tell, what it was that was upsetting him so much? This piece is starting to remind you of Gloria del Tredici's Victim. We'll go with that. Focusing attention off the animate, onto some hypothetical background figure. No, he didn't say. He told me things about his work, about his childhood, some secrets of a sort. But whatever drove his nightmares and made him mad, whatever made him careless with the chisel and furious, whatever it was, it had to do with her. Creation and destruction were sides of the same coin. Ask about nightmares. He told me only a little, she says. It was all about hell and being dead. He was walking back and forth, but he had no body, and everything was dark, and everyone else was in the same situation, not recognizing each other, not able to speak. Shades without voices. Ask about shades. What about you? Do you believe in shades like that? She rubs one wrist with the opposite thumb. I don't know enough to believe one thing or another, she says. I've been told that some people find the idea of an afterlife comforting, and the opposite quite depressing, and that this is the reason that some people seek religion. On the other hand, nothing that he believed about the afterlife seemed to give any comfort. So, Ask about afterlife. What sort of hell was it that he believed in? A pause. It went with his conception of the gods, I suppose, she says. He read me a piece from the Odyssey once, where Odysseus is about to sacrifice the black animals so that he can speak with Tiresias? Oh boy, that's a long time ago. The prophet, and his own mother doesn't recognize him. It was a symbol for him. He was lonely. Aren't we all? What the fuck, Conscience? Shut the fuck up. I'm trying to get out of this damn loop, and it's all your fault, I guess. Ask about gods. Do you believe in God? Or gods, you ask? Or universal forces? My artist told me that there are gods like the ones who lived on Thasos, where I was quarried, or on the citadels of the old cities, or in the seas. See, he told me stories about them, their exploits, and how they went to war, and how they fell in love. The air conditioning hums, sending a ripple through the velvet curtain. There were nights when he would pour out the first of the wine to one of them, to the Muses, to Aphrodite the Cyprian shore, to Apollo. He said prayers, and he made me be silent. To say the wrong thing to the gods, he said, is at least as bad as not to speak to them at all. Ask about Apollo. What did he tell you about Apollo? That he is an archer, of course, she says, and a prophet, the god of the sun, the representative of civilized song, the opposite of Dionysus? Oh, fuck. Greek mythology, it has been too long. Greek, right? Yeah, Greek. Oof. Well, the Groundhog Days are getting to me. You take a deep breath. He also warned me not to trust Apollo. He said he'd tried, and found it ineffective. Civilization only goes so deep, and under that is mere anarchy, as he put it. As an apparent afterthought, she adds, Dionysus presided at Delphi 3 months of the year, you know. Apollo did not hold even his most sacred precinct absolutely. Look, Galatea and Pygmalion and Thasos are hard enough for me to pronounce on my own Groundhog Day. Can you not give me an easier hurdle? No? Damn it. Ask about Dionysus. Tell me about him. She shifts, so that she is now standing in profile to you, facing the blank wall. There's a wiry tension in the set of her shoulders. God of wine and drama, she replies smoothly, and a dangerous Eastern influence as well, elusive, able to create illusions, a breaker of bonds, a bringer of freedom, a force for anarchy, and the end of the social order. Wait. You become aware, for half a second, of the people waiting for you in the other room, but the thought is easily squashed. Ask about masks. Illusions. Where did I get masks? Conscience? Are you throwing things in my head like you did with the whole killer thing? Whatever. Illusions? Perhaps illusion is not quite the right word. Many of his tricks involve a shift in perception. What you see is a spiritual truth to which the overly literal are blind. But there's considerable danger involved. If you don't treat the vision with respect, the result is not understanding, but insanity. Wait. She turns again, almost fully towards you, though she can't seem to actually look at you. Her face is still turned toward the side. It's related to the idea of masks and drama, she comments. She sounds as you imagine the stone might sound if it could speak. Disguised identity, cross-dressing, all those things that let you behave outside the rules, redefine your identity for yourself, encourage people to treat you in ways they otherwise might not. You find yourself staring at her curiously. What would she know about masks and disguise? Looks like my conscience kicked up a little bit too soon here. That being said, where was it in parentheses there? Ask her about masks. Is there something you're trying to tell me? You ask suspiciously. Speaking of stepping out of character. She turns to face you in a rustle resettling skirts. For a moment, she doesn't say anything, and you wonder if you've made a mistake. And then you remember an article you were reading last month. You're an avatar. You've got someone controlling you in real time. The reply, when it comes, is not from Galatea. The velvet curtain moves violently. Tiny gold tacks shower out of the wall. Half the backdrop wrenches free, thanks to the opening of a door beyond. Hi, says the newcomer. Behold, the great and powerful Oz, she adds under her breath. What? You stare down at her. She's rather short, a little on the dumpy side, and dressed in a ripped pair of blue jeans, an unlikely source from that performance you just observed. She cocks her head to one side. Sorry to disappoint, she says with a smile. It was an experiment that, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was curious what people would say. Hope you don't take it personally. You glance at Galatea, lifeless now that her controls have been switched off, and then back at the artist. You could start by telling me your real name. Wait, that's it? Oh no, to hell with you, conscience. Screw you, screw everything about this. This is bullshit. I'm calling shenanigans. Look behind curtain. You'd have to be fairly curious to risk bringing down gallery security on your head. And what are the odds that there's anything at all back there? Really? I know the truth. Take curtain. You'd have to be fairly curious, really. You might try speaking to me, she prompts. Nah, I'm good. Take curtain. Not stopping the question, the odd fixity of this idea. You reach out and grasp the curtain. Galatea gives a little gasp as you pull firmly. Tiny gold tacks fly out of the wall and roll across the polished floor. And there's just blank plaster and rolls and rows of holes where the tacks went. You turn and find Galatea regarding you in some amusement from the pedestal. Looking for something? You shrug, feeling like an idiot. In the distance, you hear the heavy tread of approaching feet. You'll never be able to explain this. A compulsion that came from outside. Totally out of character. Like a command from God. The end. Quit.